Hello and welcome to this deck profile of Paleozoic, which I went unbeaten with and winning my locals. This is a first video for this specific channel. I've never made any Yu-Gi-Oh related content before, but having got back into the game and into the scene only a couple of months ago after taking several years out, I was looking for a fun deck to play, and I have to give a massive shout out to Joshua Schmidt, who I wasn't even aware of prior to playing this deck, and I played it in the past when I used to play years and years and years ago, and it was actually more relevant than it is today. But it takes people by surprise. People really don't know sometimes what the cards do, and don't know the unaffected traits of some of the Paleozoic monsters and traps, of course, when they become monsters as well. And it was a really enjoyable day of playing 5 rounds in locals. We have a very busy locals, 20 players, so 5 rounds of Swiss. Won the first 4 rounds, and going into the last round against Ubel, I'll talk more about kind of the matchups as the deck profile goes through. I won in game 2 in time after losing game 1, so drew, which meant I had the best matchups overall at the end and won the locals. So undefeated, 4 wins, 1 draw. Very exciting stuff. So let's not waste any more time and get straight into the deck profile. I'll start by saying, of course, with some inspiration, plenty, if not loads, 90%, 99% perhaps inspiration from Joshua Schmidt. This is obviously very similar to some of the profiles that you've probably seen him using during his Master Duel streams, and I took inspiration from that. But what I wanted to tweak was going into locals. Of course, watching so much Master Duel, there is only one game in Master Duel, whereas in locals, you're playing Swiss, you're playing best of 3. So the side deck was really important. So I wanted to see if I could throw in some cheeky spices to the side deck, and the side deck definitely won me several games, which I'll also discuss as well. So starting off, 3 Backjack. It is just a brilliant card, being able to mill it and draw 3, picking obviously the best card to go onto the top of the deck and then returning them into any order that you want. It combines really well, I found, with Anomalocaris. I still struggle to say it. I just say the big boy paleo during the during the actual games, or the blue one. That works quite well. But it works really well when you use the effect of Anomalocaris to chain link 1 and then backjack chain link 2. So you're checking the first 3, you're putting the second card as the card that you want to use for backjack. The first card becomes the card you want to draw off the blue guy, and it works really, really well in harmony. And I used that several times, and it was really, really good. But backjack just is an absolute must. Then 2 Laundry Dragon Maids. I felt only 2 was necessary. I was seeing it plenty of often. I used the trap, which I'll talk about later. But yeah, this was really good. Milling a couple of times, and using actually the trap to summon it back in the end phase of the opponent's turn. Mill 3, it returns to your hand. Normal summon it in your turn. Mill another 3, and that came in handy a lot. The level 2 water, of course, is really relevant and fantastic for this type of deck. After that, it is 3 Soldier Dragons. Of course, the tech that's been brought in, and we've seen it some Belgian regionals as well, whose the name escapes me, so I apologise for that. But the Belgian regionals player, brilliant tech, amazing use of a level 2, which summons and keeps you getting resources and getting more cards onto the field. So that was also really, really good. 3 Trap Tantalizing Tune. I don't play Morganite in this. I have used Morganite at this locals in previous weeks as well, but I just didn't feel like I needed Morganite in this. And obviously, winning 4 and drawing 1 in these matchups in particular, I didn't feel like I missed Morganite. But Tune is really good for dumping some of the cards that you don't want in your hand, like Rollback, which we'll talk about, like Dragon Maid Trap sometimes as well, and Elemental Burst as well. And getting that into the grave is also really, really important, and getting the draw power. It is a risk with Ash, of course, but I only got hit once with Ash on that, and it was a time where I had enough resources in hand to kind of play through the Ash. 1 card of Demise and 1 Reasoning. I really hope Reasoning gets bumped. Of course, in Master Duel is it playing at 3, but in the TCG it is only at 1. I did see Demise twice, despite being a one-off throughout the locals and throughout the 5 rounds of Swiss, which was great. And I won both games when seeing it. It's really, really important to draw Demise. at really clutch times. Sometimes you'll draw it off Tantalizing Tune. Sometimes you'll draw it off of one of the draw traps, which is great to see as well. There's so much draw power without Morganite. I just don't feel like you need it. As I say, I just didn't miss Morganite in any way. I used the draw traps a lot with rollback to give me the advantage when I needed it. If I didn't need to pop any of their monsters, if I didn't need to set anything with a rollback on a Karma Cannon, for instance, I was always pointing at Hope for Escape and Scales of Judgment, which were really, really good on the day as well. But I'll talk about them in a little bit more detail later. Onto the traps, of course, you play 3 Morella, you play 3 Canadia, you play 3 Dynamicius, 3 Leon Coilia, and 3 Olenoids as well. Staples of the deck, really, really good. Apologies for the camera glare, by the way, but I think you can tell what I'm talking about here. Morella's brilliant in obviously dumping a trap from the deck to the grave, a normal trap that is. Just any trap. I was playing Telemant version of this, and obviously being able to dump Suliek is really good off Morella as well at times. Canadia, Book of Moon, Dynamicius, discard 1, banish 1, face up card they control. Leon Coiler was the best card on the day, just continuously putting rollback into the in the graveyard. I used it on Backjack at times. I used it on the Dragon Maid trap as well. It was really, really good. And Olenoids comes up. It really does help at times to be able to pop continuous spells. I used it against the Ubel spell, which of course forces you to attack, and that was really good at an important moment. So yeah, just obviously really, really good stuff from the Paleozoics, and obviously everyone knows the effect of when you activate any trap, either you or your opponent, you can chain them and summon them as the level 2 Aqua Waters that are unaffected by monster effects, which everyone forgets whenever they try to get rid of them with a monster effect or shuffle them back, or if you've Wabaku'd, which I'll talk about shortly. In fact, let's talk about Wabaku right now, because it was again a really, really important card on the day, and seeing this in your hand is really nice, especially when maybe you don't have the best of hands but know that you're going to get another turn is really, really important. So Wabaku was fantastic. Activating that and having Paleozoics on field that are unaffected by monster effects. There are very few spells and traps, especially in game 1, I found obviously that have removal. So seeing that was really good. And then of course, even in game 2s, when they've sided in Lightning Storms, they've sided in Harpies, they've sided in an evenly matched. Not evenly matched, it wouldn't be relevant necessarily for Wabaku, but certainly the Lightning Storms and the Harpies cards, for instance, being able to flip that just so you're not taking any damage, and obviously being able to chain a Paleozoic to it to get a body on board that's unaffected by monster effects and then can't be destroyed by battle is really nice. The best trap in the deck is by far Rollback, though, as we all know. I used it so many times throughout the day with Leon Coilia, of course, being able to put it back in grave. An excellent bit of synergy. I pray this trap never gets hit. As someone who loves control decks, it is one of the best traps that's ever been produced, I think, in recent times. And as a lot of, I think, the big YouTube voices in the space on this would say, we need more good traps, and Rollback was certainly that. Another fantastic trap, of course, is Needlebug Nest, being able to mill 5 and sometimes even target it at times with Rollback in desperate situations is quite good, just to fill your grave and make sure you're getting some Paleozoics and grave. Really, really important. So that is obviously standard. 3 trap trick, also very nice. The amount of times I use this, again, in interesting situations when you got Harpy Feather Dusted or when you got Lightning Storms, being able to flip trap trick and then banish a rollback and put a rollback as set that then is going to get popped to get that engrave even in times where they had so much more advantage. If I'd had set, say, a Scales of Judgment and then was able to activate trap trick when I got Lightning Storms, get that solemn, get a Scales into grave, and be able to use that in the end phase to draw and keep myself in the game, and probably a Wabaku in there as well to make sure I don't take any damage, was really good. Thing Griefing, again, being able to target something in their grave, a monster in their grave, and then shuffle that back at a really key moment for an interrupt. And then, of course, also getting the Backjack Send, the synergy with that was great. Used that several times on the day. And then another fantastic recently released trap. Please give us more good trap cards, normal trap cards in particular. Karma Cannon, brilliant. Set everything on the field, stops turns, stops boards being built. And the only things that obviously it does kind of frustrate at times is if the opponent realizes that once your Paleozoics have been set, they no longer, when they get reflipped, have their protection. If you do reflip it after the Karma Cannon, it no longer has the effect to be unaffected by monster effects. If they know that, sometimes it is used against you. But if you are Karma Cannoning, it's most of the time you're doing you've already done a really good job anyway, and most of the time, if you've timed it well, you will come off very, very strong from the back of that. But again, I keep saying like the best trap in the deck, but genuinely all of these traps are just brilliant. Rise to Full Height. anyone watching this looking for Paleozoic like deck profiles and builds, and if you've been watching Joshua Schmidt's streams, you will know how good this is and how funny it is when people enter the battle phase and try to attack. Not in this round of locals, but a few weeks ago, I won a game in time where I rise to full height. They attacked into the monster thinking, well, I've got rid of that monster now, I can attack again. I was up on life points at that point, and they tried to attack again, and they couldn't because of rise to full height, not knowing what it really did. And that was the end of that phase, and I won the game in time, which of the 5 games, I won 2 in time, and then the 5th game, I drew with time on my side, and rise to full height is really important. If you're playing Paleozoic, you need to be in for the fact that if you're playing at an event, playing at a locals with several rounds, like 5 rounds, you're going to be playing a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh! So it's a big mental drain playing this deck, and having cards like that are really clutch at times. As I said, another really good card, Balance of Judgment. Another reason why you don't need to play Morganite, I feel. Just being able to flip that. I flipped this against Ubel when they built up a massive board, and I'd kind of like used a lot of my resources and built the grave up. But being able to use Balance of Judgment, when you're able to use it when it's in the grave on rollback and you've got nothing on board and they've got like 8 cards, so you don't have to draw 8 cards. As long as they don't ash you, which you've obviously usually baited with a Morella or something or a Needlebug Nest earlier in the turn, is really good. And drawing that many cards is great. But I actually think my favorite draw card is Hope for Escape. I misplayed with this once and put it on board when I had less than 1,000 life points, which makes me sound like such a noob. But just remember, I've only been playing for the last couple of months after a long, long time away from this game. And seeing it sit on the field when I had 700 life points left, realizing my mistake was horrific. I still managed to win that game despite the misplay somehow, because I managed to get it in grave. And of course, when you roll back this in grave, you're not having to pay the 1,000 life points, which is really, really important. So not having to pay that cost, getting 2, sometimes 3 cards off this is really nice. I didn't come up against any deck that raised their life points, so I never got to draw more than 2 or 3. But again, it's great because you can sometimes do it twice in the same turn where you're using it on the field, you're drawing 2, you then use rollback in grave, and you're using it again, but drawing 3. You can sometimes get 5 draws off that 1 card in 1 turn by using it twice with rollback, which is again really nice. And then the only one-ofs was the obvious Elemental Burst, which again, for those that don't realize, you don't have to pay cost when you play against them. They're like, this is the most broken thing ever, and it's great. Of course, it is a bit of a brick in hand, but when you've got Tantalizing Tune or something else to ditch it with, or you can of course set it and hope that your opponent sometimes gets rid of it, which does happen, is also really important. And then lastly, the Dragon Maid Tidying, the trap, its second word in their title I always forget the name of and call it the Dragon Maid Trap, but tidying, really strong. I know it's a bit of a brick when you draw it, but again, really, really solid on the day. I've used the first effect before when I've had Soldier Dragons on field. Used the Soldier Dragons effects. They've ashed. Sorry, no, they've not ashed. Sorry, they've impermanenced it. As soon as they target it and able to bounce this back to hand and something on their field, and still get the Soldier Dragons effect despite bouncing it back to hand. If they ash it, it doesn't matter, of course, because it's going to get negated. But if they imperm it, if they target it with something else that's going to stop it from working and bouncing it back to the hand and bouncing one of their cards at the same time to get you that advantage has happened, and it is quite nice when that does happen. So that's great. And of course, I was putting it back into the grave with Leon Corlier quite a lot as well and getting that effect. Into the extra deck, I played 2 Opabinia. I think it's really important to play 2. I don't think you do need the 3rd. I think I agree with Josh on that point, and I don't ever feel like I needed the 3rd at any time. It is funny that this effect to search, of course, is unaffected by the monster effects like all the other Paleozoics. It's funny that this effect to draw or to get the search is a hard once per turn, but the blue guy, Anamalakaris, which you can say 10 times into a mirror when you're drunk and have the best of luck with that. But when this one isn't once per turn, you can get 2 of these on board. You get the when obviously a spell or trap is taken away from the spell and trap card zone, either by you activating it, by it being destroyed, by someone getting rid of it and going to the grave. And getting that flip of the cards at the top of the deck, and if it's a normal trap, you add it to your hand. And I've used it with having 2 on board. It's strange that this one has no restrictions on it being a hard once per turn. This doesn't. This does. And I used that so many times, and it was great to see that in action as well. And of course, summoning Opabinia in attack mode when you've got a Wabaku, for instance, gives you some really good synergy, so you can be able to attack and then get the benefit of going into, of course, down a Magician, and then, of course, either one of the 2 Zeus that I play as well. Need to get myself a second ulti because it's a beautiful card. But need to make sure I get myself another ulti of that. But Zeus was really strong when I used it. Good against your Bell, of course, because it doesn't destroy, it just sends. Down a Magician came in sometimes, but you need to. I think one of the key things I've learned about Zeus is that sometimes you do make the Down a Magician. Sometimes don't make it because you want to. As soon as you make Down a Magician, they know what you're doing. So sometimes you might need to just go into with an Oppibinia with one trap material on it, go straight into the Zeus, and know that you're not going into the Downer first. If you can afford to get the Downer there, even if you've already got two materials, I find it's worth it because sometimes they do pop your Paleos or they pop your back row and you're able to add another material to Zeus to get it live again. But it was really important, I thought, to learn when to play down a Magician and not. It's a really underrated part of the deck. Totally Awesome's there. I didn't play it all day. And maybe that's because I don't really know when to use it best, but I didn't play it all day in any of the 15, no, not 15, it'll be about 12, 12 rounds I played on the day. I didn't play 12 matches, sorry, that I played on the day. I didn't see it, didn't use it once, but still a really important card and important you have it in your extra deck. Gigantic Sprite I did use. Really like going into this with obviously the Link monster. Sometimes going into it just to get a lot of materials under your Zeus and get into a 1600 attack monster if you haven't got enough materials to go into your blue guy. Really good, obviously, sometimes to get the detached material, so it locks everybody into Link and rank and level 2s. So against Snake Eye, which I didn't face on the day, which I think is important to point out because for those looking for kind of decks that are good against Snake Eye, I've played it once at locals, did lose, didn't get the best of draws in previous locals against Snake Eye, but it can win against Snake Eye, and when it does win against Snake Eye, it feels great, but you have to be playing the cards at the right time. It's really important because as soon as you misplay, as soon as you mistime something or you get a bit unlucky with the amount of extenders they might have, you are going to lose, but it is disruptive against them. But yeah, Gigantic Sprite was really strong and really good to push for game as well when you get that double attack point boost. Typhon, again, also really good if you are going second and you've got a Backjack in hand, just being able to summon Backjack and going into Typhon was really, really strong. So very much enjoyed that. And it's such an underrated card. I know it's in every extra deck these days, but still, I just find it such an underrated card. Going into the Link monsters, one Anima. The amount of times people forget to not place their cards in Anima zones and being able to take their usually quite powerful cards that they've placed in those zones is great. But of course, a needless ban of Link Karibo. They could have hit so many other Link ones, but it's there. I thought about playing Almirage, but I just find it funnier when they misuse the zones and use Anima to steal those monsters. So Anima definitely needs to be in there. Played one SB Little Knight as well, which also came up a number of times. I've actually been tempted to play Masquerena, and the only way of doing that, of course, sometimes is I just don't know where I'd get it out, but you can sometimes make an Border Masquerena at times so you can go into your night and get a banish in your opponent's turn. It rarely happens, but because of obviously the limits and only having one Zeus in Master Duel, I have played Masquerena in the extra deck. And it's been quite funny at times to use Masquerena in Paleozoic, but yeah, it's just the one of Little Knight in this setup, and it worked really, really well. The Paleozoic Cambarasta, again, fantastic card, being able to remove your own set spell and trap, be that a rollback, be that an elemental burst, be that a tidying, send it to grave, be it a Paleozoic if you don't, if you just want to get a Paleo engrave and you have no use for that specific effect, if it's a Canadia or a Leon Corlier at the time, getting that into grave and then adding or rather setting a card. So if you're under draw, it's not being ashed. And of course, it can also target an opponent's set spell or trap as well, which is also really good. And that goes into, when you're going into that, you tend to go into either Gigantic Sprite or you're going into Zealantis with Marincess, Coral, and Anemone. I actually played one of the rounds against the Marincess deck, which is quite funny seeing this come out and going into this, of course. I didn't use the Zealantis obviously effect during the Marincess deck because it's a water deck, so why would you? But when it does come out at times to either push for game, I might summon back Canberra Rasta, so you then got 3,200 damage on board, of course, just with those two. Just to push for game at times, I might do that. But against any other deck that's not a water deck, being able to get Zealantis out, I did this against Rescue Ace. Rescue Ace on board, Hydrant, etc. And going into Zealantis, using the effect to banish itself and every other card in the field, special summoning itself back. You don't special summon back their monsters if you've gone to this through this, because you are locked into waters using this, and only you can summon waters. So I can't summon back my opponent's monsters that are not water. And the amount of times that they have to check that ruling, but it's a really cool mechanic, not having to summon back your opponent's monsters, and you just banish their board, and it's great, and certainly definitely hands you a lot of advantage when that happens. So I feel like I'm rambling on a bit for a first ever deck profile, but I'm going into maybe a little bit more detail than I need to, but I hope you're still appreciating it. Side deck, 2 Threatening Roar, just good to bring in for Tenpai. And I didn't come up against Tenpai today. There are Tenpai players at our locals, but I didn't need to bring it in. I didn't feel like I needed to main it at any time. I did bring it in when I went into time. So if I'm siding out cards, I tend to side out sometimes Soldier Dragon. I tend to side out Tantalizing Tune. I tend to side out some other cards, and you'll see why I'm siding out monsters in just a second. There's a reason as to why, but I'll still play in Reasoning. Threatening Roar came in clutch at times, so in time they can't, declare an attack, and that's really important to have. You want to stall as much as you can in time, not by illegal means, but just by stalling out as much as you can by stopping and delaying turns and staying alive. I didn't use this once, but I've always wanted to. It's still not yet come up. Witch's Strike, really good against Voiceless Voice. There are Voiceless Voice players at our locals, but haven't used it yet. I'd love to find more decks. Let me know in the description down below, or comments down below rather, if you know of any other decks really which are going to come in really clutch. I'm sure there are, but Witch's Strike, when it comes off, is going to be great to be able to just destroy their whole field and their hand too. The biggest card for me on the day was this. Volcanic Scattershot and Accelerator Reload. In round 4, I was up against Chimera Fusion and lost game 1, won game 2. Going into time where you have to side out your rollbacks, it's so important to get this in your grave at any point. Managed to see the Blaze Accelerator Reload milled instead with no scatter shots. I think it was off of a Needlebug at the time. And obviously when you're able to banish that Accelerator Reload, send a scatter shot, burn for 500, send the other 2, burn for another 1,000, and pop their monsters if indeed they have any. It's just really, it won me 2 games in time, and it was just, it's just an absolute must. I know it seems really cheesy, but when you're playing a deck that you're going sometimes into 20 plus, 30 minute plus game ones, you need to have that time condition. Tempted to play Dogwood, but I just feel like in a 55 card deck, which is what this is, I just don't feel like you're consistently seeing it enough. But when you're milling things like Scattershot, again, really good. So definitely really important to have that. Now, this is where more of the spice comes in from I say spice, you may not call it that, but where I was thinking, where can I get the most advantage off of side cards? Keeping Reasoning in, being able to use the Reasoning. I know it's only one of, but it came up twice during this day. Having not had level 2s and going into something that stuns them, going into something that stops them playing. The first card, which I didn't see all day, so I can't really give you any information about how well it would perform, was 3 Barrier Statue with the Torrent. Of course, locking everybody into only being able to specialize on waters is great. You can protect this with Wabaku. You can protect this with if you're obviously siding in Threatening Roar, you can protect it with that. You can protect it with your Canadians. You can protect it with your Dynamicious and stop them from attacking you in any way, shape, or form, or protect it from being destroyed battle. It keeps it on board, keeps it on field, and it does. And when I've tested, it does work. So I really enjoyed having that in the side deck when I've played online, but haven't yet used it as effectively at locals. The one I did use effectively at locals was a bit of a controversial pick, but 3 Inspector Border. There's something in this that tells me you could potentially main this card. I don't know. I don't think consistently wise you could, but I enjoyed siding it in. I saw it a lot, and in game 2 against Rescue Ace, I not top decked it, but I drew it into my first 5 hands, was able to use it. Going second, if they've made a board of monsters that negate so much stuff, like just being able to normal this and knowing I can then kind of stall out in a way with traps and to build up my advantage while they can't activate stuff and they can't pop stuff, they can't remove my set spells and traps before they can activate. It came up a lot. It was really important. I won a game by hitting for 2,000. I think I won 2 games, in fact. The last round against Ubel in the second game when I was obviously down 1 game, needing to get some damage on board. When they played Gustav Max, of course, we had to burn you for 2,000. I managed to get a Volcanic go off for 500. I managed to get a 2,000 damage with this on top of a monster with 0 attack to get that damage in. Just played it quite smartly at the time. I think it works. do let me know if you've got your thoughts on this. I'd love to see if you've had any success in Paleozoics using this type of stun additions. You can call it salty, you can call it cheeky. I like it. I think it works, and I've had success using it. And until I don't have success using it, I want to keep on using it. So, expect a border. Really good. Very much enjoyed that. And that is it. That is the deck profile of my unbeaten run winning at my locals. The 4 rounds, to give you a little bit more detail on that, was specifically round 1 against Galaxy Photon, won that 2-0. Round 2 against Rescue Ace, won that 2-1 with the Inspector Border attack in time, and then some Rise to Full Heights. Another card you can protect your cards from being destroyed, of course, like the Barrier Statue and Inspector Border as well. Marincess in round 3. Marincess won their first 2 rounds. I got paired against the round 3, which probably is quite fortunate. It's a very good matchup for this. Not the most competitive of decks, of course, but still exciting to see it. But when you Karma Cannon the Link 4, obviously it's a little bit sad, especially when it's in their end phase and they can only use the effect to negate in your turn. And then round 4 played against a very good Chimera Fusion player that had taken it to Nats, and I felt almost bad in that game because I did misplay a couple of times in the round that I won in the second game. After losing the first game, but in the third game played quite well. Obviously time was short, managed to get quite fortunate with the mills into Scattershot the Blaze Accelerator, which was really important to win that round as well. So really exciting stuff. And then Ubel lost game 1. It was a really long game 1. It was like 35 minutes long. As you can imagine, Ubel against Paleo was rather toxic, but enjoyed it a lot, and really forced me to think about my plays, forced my opponent to think about their plays. And then game 2, managed to get the damage on board to avoid getting good stuff maxed. Got 2,500 on boards early enough, so I was able to get that differential when time eventually ran out. And by that time, I had the best record on the day, unbeaten with Paleos at locals. It was a great feeling, great moment. And I really love this deck. I really enjoy playing this deck. And I really think it's really important to get more people playing Paleozoic, and maybe people coming up with more ideas about how to play it. And I hope the more people do. A massive shout out once again to Joshua Schmidt for being the inspiration behind this. And if he ever sees this, I'd love to know his thoughts on the sides of Inspector Border and Barrier Statue. I reckon he'd call me cheesy, but I enjoy using it a lot. Many thanks for watching. You can subscribe and like if you like. But I don't know if I'm ever going to make any more content. I might if I'm ever more successful with Paleozoic, or if you get any more ideas. But this will be a first video. Maybe be the last. Who knows? All that lovely stuff on YouTube. Like, subscribe. See you soon. And as always, keep playing Paleo.